Story 1. Streetlight Snuff. The summer after high school, I spent a lot of time going on long walks at night with this girl I liked and sneaking into the back of her parents' house to make out with her. She lived about 30 minutes away from me, and I did most of the walking back and forth. One night in July, I was doing just that, in her bed, making out with her, and I looked at my phone and realized it was midnight. I figured I really ought to get going. I snuck out the back door, looped around the side of her house, and hopped the fence. I actually really enjoyed these walks to and from her house. They were quite peaceful. The neighborhood was always quiet, sort of an upper-middle-class joint. There were big pockets of darkness on the road always, where the street light was blocked by large overhanging trees. Pretty nostalgic in hindsight. When I was about 2/3 of the way home, I came to a staggered double T intersection and turned right onto my street. Looking left, I saw the long street known as Kildare. It was one of those that, rather than being paved, had a lot of big concrete squares that comprised it. My own house was hidden from view, still a little too far to see. But down Kildare, I noticed something odd. The street lights at the end were starting to go out, one at a time, as though they were reacting to some invisible wave coming towards me from the far side of the street. They were not going back on afterwards. I looked behind me and noticed a similar phenomenon moving in from the school playground. The lights on the far side went dim, then those at the school, then the one on the janitor's shed. The wave of darkness was catching up to me as I walked, so I began to jog. I didn't know what the danger really might be, but it didn't seem comfortable. Looking behind me, I noticed that the wave had increased its pace as well. I started to run faster, but I couldn't keep ahead of it. The street light just over my head went out, then the one ahead of me. Even the porch light over my house, which I could just now barely see coming into view. And I was in total darkness, but for the light of the moon and the light pollution from the downtown bouncing off the partial cloud. I got chills and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I looked around furiously, but I didn't see anything that could be considered dangerous. Just as I was approaching my house, I noticed that I was starting to get tunnel vision. I didn't really feel dizzy, but it felt like my consciousness was just shutting down. I wanted to freak out, but it felt like I couldn't. I just sort of relaxed into a state of unconsciousness. When I awoke, I was in my high school's football field, about a 30-minute walk in a perpendicular direction from my house and my girlfriend's house. I had no memory of collapsing to the ground or anything that happened while unconscious. My phone was dead, and I had no idea what time it was or how much time had passed. I walked home without encountering any more problems and fell asleep in my bed. In the morning, I was right where I expected to be. I never experienced anything like that ever again, and when I think about it now, it actually seems creepier than it did at the time. Story 2. 19th birthday. This story makes more sense if you know that I'm a girl, and at the time, it was my 19th birthday. 19 is the drinking age here, and my sweet older brother decided to take me out to party a bit. He was trying to give guys some space to hit on me and not hover around me too much. He would be off hitting on girls himself and at the bar getting himself drinks. He always made sure there was one or two in my hand, but my tolerance wasn't that high, and he ended up pounding back most of mine as well. I had a bunch of fun, and a couple guys did hit on me. But there was this one creepy guy standing against the wall, watching me the entire time. He was holding a drink, but I never saw him sip it. I remember him wearing an orange polo shirt. Very distinct and easy to pick out of a crowd. We stayed until the last call, and my brother was pretty hammered at that time. He was loudly singing songs that weren't playing, and was kind of stumbling around. I didn't think we needed to call an Uber or a cab though, because we did only live like 5 blocks away. It was a struggle to get him to give me his ticket for coat check, but I got that. I got our coats, got him to get his coat on, which was also a struggle, and then we left. My birthday is in February, and it was pretty freezing outside. The snow was starting to come down, and I wanted to get home quick before it got icy. It was difficult enough walking in high heels. My brother was a great big bundle of jolly. Still singing, I had to try to force him to move, and it was getting really frustrating. After a painstaking half hour, we made it about halfway to our house, and my brother just stopped moving, threw his arms up in the air, and just yelled. I was getting real tired of his shit, and I just kept walking, thinking he would catch up. But he wasn't coming, and I looked back. He looked like he was dog paddling in the air. Come on, let's go. I tried to encourage him. It was then when I saw something bright orange in my peripheral vision. The creepy guy from the bar was about a block away. He wasn't even wearing a coat, and still, he was just watching me and my brother. I walked back over to him to try to pull him forward again, and my brother collapsed onto the ground. I tried to cushion his fall as best I could, but again, I was in heels. He had passed out at the worst possible time, and I began freaking out. I knew I needed to call a cab or a friend or something. I called a friend of mine who I know has a car, and told her about my brother passing out and that there was a creepy guy still watching me who had seen me earlier at the bar. She told me she'd be over right away, and her boyfriend was coming along for the ride. I felt relief, but after I hung up the phone, I looked up to see the creepy guy was coming over. Hey, is this guy alright? The creepy guy said. Yes, we're fine. Help is on the way, I told him without looking at him. My buddy's an EMT, and he's coming over to check him out if you want, the guy said. No, thank you. I think we're going to be okay, I tried to say as professionally as possible. I couldn't help but notice in my peripheral vision that the guy never broke eye contact with me, and he even started inching closer towards me until my brother, on the ground, yelled something out and moved around. The creepy guy backed off a bit. 5 minutes of awkward silence passed. My heart was pounding, and the creepy guy was looking around anxiously. For his buddy, presumably. I kept debating whether or not I should call 911. I didn't want to draw additional attention to myself, and my friend was going to be on the way. Oh, there's my buddy. The creepy guy sounded excited as, I kid you not, a windowless van came around the corner. One of those with the box backs. But to my luck, my friend's car was pulling up right behind it. The creepy guy had started to move towards me again until he saw the other car. And when my friend and her boyfriend stepped out and hauled my brother into the back seat, the creepy guy was just standing there scratching his head awkwardly. Another fellow got out of the van, and they were both standing on the sidewalk as we drove away with my friend. It's terrifying to think of what might have happened if they hadn't shown up when they did. Story 3. Hitchhiking Offer. We had a cottage that we went to every summer when we were kids. Me and my brother, that is. And we would often go for walks in the evening along the half-sand, half-gravel road that led to the cottage area. It was one of those forested, winding country roads that at night is extremely fun to drive through. Probably not the safest, though, to be walking as a pedestrian. There were certainly coyotes in the area, but we were pretty careful about cars. Whenever we saw headlights coming from either direction, we stepped off the road before proceeding. One summer night, while walking, a white pickup truck pulled up beside us, and its window rolled down. A man was seated inside and leaned his head out the window. "You kids looking for a lift?" he asked roughly. We had had the whole don't get in the car with strangers talk before, and furthermore this was a joy walk, so we declined politely and kept walking. His window rolled up, and he proceeded on his way down the dark road. Some time went by, maybe half an hour, and I began to hear something strange behind us. It sounded like the crunching of car tires we had been hearing all night, but there were no headlights. Peering into the darkness, I thought I could make out a white pickup truck, but I couldn't be sure. I stopped hearing the noise of crunching gravel anyway, and I resumed the conversation with my little brother. But the crunching picked up again shortly after. Again, I kept my head on a swivel and kept checking over my shoulder, sure at every turn that I was seeing something there. I wondered how he was seeing us, and realized that my brother kept taking out a flashlight and shining it around on the road. Eventually, I struck up the nerve to risk scaring him and asked my brother if he thought we were being followed by a white pickup truck. He looked into the darkness, as scared as I was, and also came to the conclusion that he wasn't sure. Our pace quickened as our walk continued, as did the crunching noise some meters behind us, and at one point, that crunching noise stopped, followed by the sound of a car door opening and closing. It was then that we both realized what was happening and made a break for it into the woods. We knew the area pretty well, and we knew we were getting close to the cottages. My brother tripped at one point, but I got him back on his feet as quickly as I could. I looked behind, and I could also hear that it was a man, grunting, chasing after us into the darkness. But at last we reached the light of the cottage area, and from that lit street we looked back into the woods to see him, defeated, but just staring up at us. We made it inside our cottage and never saw him again. We clung to our parents pretty tightly for the rest of that trip, and I didn't go on another night walk like that until I was an adult. Thank you for listening, guys. Next week, Thursday, another video, brand new, and tune in at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday night for Nightmare Theater, an open book club for nightmares. You can also send your nightmares to theforgottengrove@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to read it on air. Until next time, embrace the beautiful dark.